Next week, F1 is back, and we're starting the first of the two last triple headers. Only 6 races to go, and even now F1 is changing up things. This time to the track at the USGP next week. But that isn't all, as in shocking F1 fashion. Ricciardo could be back next week as well. Wasn't he just fired last week? And what about those track changes? What could F1 have thought of this time? The United States Grand Prix organizers have made a series of changes to the Austin circuit in an attempt to decrease track limits issues. With the Circuit of the Americas, COTA venue being resurfaced for this year's event, there was a chance to resolve concerns that arose during last year's race, such as drivers exploiting the white lines at the circuit's boundary. In fact, the problem of drivers cutting corners became so common that Haas requested a right of review for what it alleged were several breaches by racing competitors that should have resulted in sanctions. While the FIA stewards denied Haas's plea, onboard video evidence of drivers running off track, particularly at turn 6, generated concerns from other teams over the lack of action done. Finally, while the FIA agreed that onboard film of track limit violations existed, it stated that external monitoring of individual corners was insufficient to make an accurate judgment on whether drivers had crossed the white lines. Given the circumstances that arose last year, Austin has made a series of changes to the circuit that should prevent a recurrence this year. The asphalt verges on numerous sections of the track have been shortened by 1.5 meters and replaced with turf, which should discourage cars from running completely across them. These are located on the inside of turns 6, 13, 14, and 15. Austin also stated that it has installed cameras in strategic places to better monitor any cars that are considered to have run off the track. A tweak has also been made at the exit of turn 11, a tight left-hander leading to the back straight. This was once an asphalt runoff area with turtle bumps at the exit, but it has recently been replaced with a resin-bound gravel-filled infill. This artificial gravel was pioneered in Zandvoort some years ago to dissuade drivers while also preventing loose stones from being hauled back on the course. It is known that this modification was made as an experiment for this year, with COTA attempting to balance the needs of F1 and MotoGP. Austin race promoter Bobby Epstein said, "There are some areas where it's hard because if you run MotoGP and F1 on the same track, one wants gravel in an area where another one wouldn't. You can't have both, and you can't cut into the track and put in gravel, then flip it back and hope it stays watertight when you have clay underneath it. So there's some back and forth challenges to it." Other curbs around the track have also been rebuilt, with drainage installed to cope with rainy weather. In addition to the adjustments in track limitations, Austin has undergone resurfacing since last year's event, which should help relieve some of the bumps that drivers complained about in 2023. "It was mainly to get rid of the bumps," Epstein explained. "Some of that track was 12 years old, so it was time. I know Max Verstappen gave it a pretty poor review last year, so I hope we hear something positive. I'm certain we're going to hear, 'This is like a totally new track. It's fantastic.' I'm not sure if the drivers will say that, but they'll probably enjoy some new track surface. But on the other hand, it will be interesting to see if they can keep in between the new lines." Next to these changes, I owe you some news about Ricciardo. I said he could be back again next weekend, and that all has to do with the race organisers. Daniel Ricciardo may be from Australia, but the now former Formula 1 driver has chosen the United States as his second spiritual home, and without him on the grid, the forthcoming Grand Prix in Austin, Texas may not feel the same. However, we may still see a cowboy-hatted Ricciardo rambling about the paddock at the United States Grand Prix, as event organizer Bobby Epstein promises to keep him busy with lots of off-track entertainment. In the lead-up to the Singapore Grand Prix in September, it became evident that Daniel Ricciardo's position at VCARB was under jeopardy. The Australian had underperformed, and Helmut Marko had hinted that VCARB backers wanted the team to revert to its original function as a junior operation teaching potential drivers for Red Bull Racing. Following a failed miraculous weekend in Singapore, VCARB confirmed that Ricciardo will be replaced by Liam Lawson, effective immediately. That was very terrible news for US Grand Prix promoter Bobby Epstein. Daniel Ricciardo has totally embraced the Texas atmosphere throughout the years, arriving at Circuit of the Americas with cowboy boots, 10-gallon hats, and, most notably, an entire horse. But if Ricciardo still wants to travel to Austin, Texas, US Grand Prix promoter Bobby Epstein would welcome him. Daniel, he may be able to have just as big of an impact out of the car as he has in it at our Grand Prix, Epstein said. I'm not sure that necessarily people are buying tickets to come see him race if he's not in a competitive car, right? So if you're coming because he's part of the F1 community, I think he can still be part of the F1 community in a pretty meaningful way. With Red Bull anxious to keep Daniel Ricciardo's services as an ambassador, it's possible that the Australian may be hired to travel to Texas regardless. However, considering the US Grand Prix is the first F1 race since he was dropped in Singapore, the wounds may still be raw. Nonetheless, Bobby Epstein hopes a hatted and booted Danny Riss arrives in Austin ready to mingle. He's really loved in Texas, and I think he likes it here, Epstein said. And so I would hope that he makes himself available more to the fans than he would otherwise be if he had an obligation in the car. I hope he's still coming here because we got a lot of people that would love to shake his hand, or get his autograph, or take a picture. Just see him around town. We'll keep him busy. Although Ricciardo may be met with open arms, his successor won't, as Lawson's return to the cockpit will be everything but smooth. His campaign in the US Grand Prix will be compounded by an engine penalty, which will most likely result in a 10-place grid drop, Horner stated. He'll definitely get an engine penalty in Austin, Horner said. So he'll have a bit of a soft landing, or soft return. Lawson, 22, had excelled earlier in the 2023 season, filling in for Ricciardo in 5 races while the Australian driver was out with a fractured wrist. This setback, originally reported by Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko, is anticipated to make Lawson's weekend in Austin very tough. The first race won't be easy for him because he has an engine penalty, Marko said. 10 places in the sprint race, so that doesn't exactly make life easier in Austin. Despite the penalty, Lawson will have 2 chances to show off his abilities at the US Grand Prix, with both a sprint race and the main event providing opportunity for him to move up the field. As talk swirls over a possible full-time position alongside Max Verstappen in 2025, Lawson's performance in the next 6 races will be critical. While the engine penalty may affect his start at the US Grand Prix, the Kiwi driver will be eager to impress Red Bull management and secure his long-term future in F1. The big question is if it will result in a ride at VCARB or perhaps even Red Bull for next year. What do you think? Is Lawson the answer Red Bull has been looking for? And could he be one to beat Tsunoda consistently over the next 6 races? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe to receive daily F1 updates.